Hey, it's Vicky, and today I'm here to do one of my favorite videos that I film all year, and it's one of my favorite videos to watch here at the end of the year, and that is my favorite books of 2022. I love filming this video. I love watching everybody else's favorite books of the year. It's just a good time. I do my favorite books a little bit differently. I don't do like a top 10 or, a top whatever. I like to pick sorry, my cat's trying to get out of the room. Okay, bye, Juno. I try to do my favorite book from most of the genres that I've read, just because, I don't know, it just makes it a little bit different. So most of the books on this list are 5-star reads, but there are a couple that were 4 stars, but they just happen to be my favorite in that genre, if that makes any sense. So I have, I think, 12 books I'm gonna talk about. So let's dive in. So right off the bat, let's talk about my most read genre, of course, was horror. And my favorite horror book that I read, it was kind of hard to pick, honestly, because I read some good stuff this year, but my favorite one, the one that has still just stuck out and has stuck with me, even though I read it in the summertime, here we are in December, and I still think about this book, and that is Burnt Offerings by Robert Marasco. This one was just so atmospheric. It had such a slow burn that for me, I know slow burn horror doesn't work for everybody, but it worked for me, especially in this book. It was just so well done. I loved the sort of underlying like family drama. I don't want to know if I want to call it drama, but the just sort of underlying theme of like an unhealthy family, and then they're put in this situation, this isolated situation with this creepy house. And yeah, it was atmospheric, it was dark, it was fun, I loved it. And then kind of in the same vein, my favorite mystery / thriller that I read this year was by far The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. I don't have my copy with me right now because I lent it to a friend because I felt like it was one of those books I just felt like I had to pass it on to somebody. This one I really loved. I don't normally give thrillers 5 stars. It takes a lot for me to give a thriller 5 stars. This one got 5 stars. I think it was a combination of just the darkness of this book. It got pretty dark and twisted. It also had a lot of like eroticness in it that I don't normally read. So it felt sort of, to me, it felt sort of refreshing because I don't normally read that kind of stuff. And then the ending kind of, my jaw dropped. Like it was one of those endings that just like, what? So yeah, overall, this was a great reading experience. I really enjoyed it. And now I need to read more Ashley Winstead because I think she might be my jam. Next up is my favorite young adult book. I actually read a lot of young adult this year, which is strange, but the majority of the young adult I read was horror. Big surprise. And I find that I find that I do like young adult horror. So my favorite one this year was The Way to Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. This was a Carrie retelling, and I just really loved the experience of this book. I listened to this book on audio, and the audiobook was fantastic. Just the way that it was cast with like all the different narrators. There was just a lot like to the audiobook that really just heightened the experience, and I had a great time reading this book. I couldn't stop listening to it. I thought it was great. And I initially gave this book like a 4.5, and I've since upped it to a 5 because it's the end of the year and I'm still thinking about it and thinking about how much I enjoyed the experience. So it became a 5-star read and my favorite YA book of 2022. My next favorite that I want to talk about is one that I think I would categorize this as just sort of like fiction, general fiction. I don't know if this is literary or not. To me, this was just like a general fiction book that was just really, really well done. And that is My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. This is another one that I listened to on audio and really thought the audiobook was really good. This book deals with really dark topics, which it seems like has been sort of the theme so far in this video. I liked a lot of dark stuff in 2022. It deals with a young girl and this inappropriate relationship she had with a teacher. And what made this so good was that you see her as an adult and how this relationship affected her. And because she's sort of reflecting on this relationship. And just that whole process of you see her as a kid when she's in it versus how she is now as a grown woman. And the writing was just so good. But yeah, this is another one that's really dark that I don't know I would just openly kind of like recommend to just anybody. But it was very well written, and yeah, it made my top list. My favorite middle grade book of 2022 was by far Ghost by Jason Reynolds. I loved this book so much. I can't wait to read the rest of the books in the series. Do I have book 2 and 3? I know I have book 2. I need to read book 2 as soon as possible. But anyways, this one just really, I just loved it because it deals with a young kid who joins a track team and just sort of how he sort of makes those connections and friendships with his teammates and also with the relationship he builds with his coach, because he is a troubled kid. He has things going on in his personal life that are affecting him, and just seeing what being on this team did for him, it was just really inspiring, really beautiful. This book it brought me joy. I just loved this book so much, and yeah, I can't wait to read the rest of the books. All right, now let's talk about some nonfiction books. I always do like my favorite memoir and then my favorite just nonfiction book because it's too hard to just pick one nonfiction book. My favorite memoir of 2022 by far was The Storyteller by Dave Grohl. This was actually like one of my top books. If I was like ranking for quite a while this year, it was at the top of the list. I just loved this because even though I wasn't like a huge Foo Fighters fan back in the day or even now, I mean, I appreciate their music, but like I wouldn't like go to one of their concerts or anything like that. But just hearing Dave Grohl, because I listened to this on audio, he narrated the audiobook, just hearing his story and how like basically like what he came from and what his just passion for music, how it just enriched his life in so many ways. And it was funny. It was also heartbreaking at times. It was just really, really well done. And it put me on a 90s rock kick. I started listening to a lot of Foo Fighters and Nirvana, of course, which, and then I was on a 90s rock kick for quite a while after reading this book, and it's one that I would like to own, just to have it on my shelves because I would probably revisit it someday. And then my favorite just like nonfiction book that I read this year was probably Bad Blood by John Carreyrou. This one was about the whole Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos debacle situation. This book was just so well researched. And you can just tell that he really did the work and talked to a lot of people. And I learned a lot about the situation, which was the whole reason I read the book. And though at times it felt a little bit heavy in terms of the like descriptions of the technology that was being used and stuff, that sort of bogged it down a little bit sometimes. But overall, I thought this book was just really well done. And if you're at all interested in the topic, you should definitely read this book. It's going to be the best book you read on the topic for sure. Okay, now going into my favorite poetry collection or poetry book of 2022, because I read 5 or 6 poetry books this year, which was good. It was a goal of mine to read more poetry, and I definitely did. But the one that stood out to me the most was Aint Burned All the Bright by Jason Reynolds. So yes, Jason Reynolds is on my list twice this year. And this one was a really interesting book. I don't have it. I got it from the library, but I loved the topic. The topics in the book basically dealt with COVID, the events of 2020, really, which were COVID was the big one, but also all of the events going on with Black Lives Matter and all of the protests and things that were going on after George Floyd was killed. And yeah, he sort of put it together in this book with these amazing, I don't want to say illustrations. It was like just like this artwork that he did with, I can't remember the artist's name, but just the coupling of that art and his poetry, it was just such a touching book. And it really stuck with me. I really loved it. And Jason Reynolds is just amazing, and I can't wait to read more of his stuff. And then my favorite graphic novel, this should not come as a surprise to anybody. My favorite graphic novel of 2022 was Heartstopper. Like, take your pick which volume, because they were all great. I think the first 5-star one though for me was volume 2. But regardless, I loved this, which is so strange because I don't normally like teen romance books, but I loved Heartstopper. It just made me so happy. I love Alice Oseman's artwork, just the way she draws people and everything. Everything. It was such a good story. I can't wait to finish it this year, although I'm sad about it because I don't want it to end, but I also want to know what happens. So yeah, by far, Heartstopper was my favorite graphic novel. All right, then my favorite classic. I read a few classics this year. I want to say I read like 6 or 7, maybe 8. But this one got 5 stars for me. And I did a whole video about it because it was a 100 epic reads pick, and that is The Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck. This is an American classic dealing with the Dust Bowl in the 1930s, and it was just really, really good. I was so invested in this family and what they were going through. Steinbeck's writing is very approachable. I just loved like everything about this. I was a little nervous going in because it is a bit of a longer book. It's like 600 pages, but it did not read that way. It went very quickly. I can see why this book is a classic, why it won the Pulitzer. I mean, it deserves the accolades, in my opinion. It was just very well done. So if you've ever thought about reading this book, don't be afraid, just do it, it's great. All right guys, we have 2 more books to talk about. The next one is my favorite historical fiction book of 2022, and that was Snowflower and the Secret Fan. This is another one that was super, super sad. Like I said, I read a lot of sad stuff in 2022, but it took place in 19th century China, and it was just one of those books that the hardships that these people endured, these women specifically, it was very hard to read at times, very sad. But again, it's one of those books that's so brutal, but is written so beautifully that it sort of balances out. And yeah, this was a surprise. I definitely want to read more Lisa C. because, like I said, the writing in here was fantastic. But yes, it was also depressing. And then my final favorite of 2022 is my favorite sci-fi / fantasy. I kind of combine those two because those are 2 genres that I don't read a ton of, but I have enough combined to make a favorite pick of the year. And my favorite one was Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This one, I loved this one because, without getting spoilery, there is it has to do with the plot, basically. Where this book went plot-wise, I think most people probably could have guessed where it was going. I did not. So when the plot reached the point that it reached, and I'm trying to be vague so I don't like spoil anything. When it reached that point, I was like, oh, we're going there? Okay. And from there on out, I absolutely loved this book. I love Andy Weir's like humor. I love the way he explains science-y things because I am not science-y. But the way he explains things and writes things, it seems approachable to me. I like it. There was a character in this book that I absolutely loved so much, and I just loved it. So for being a sci-fi fantasy book, or sci-fi book, this is a sci-fi book, it was great, and I'm so, so glad that I read this. All right, guys, so those are my favorite books of 2022. It was a really good reading year. I read over 100 books this year, which is awesome. I've only done that once. Last year, I cracked 100. I did it again this year, and I read so many good things that it was sort of hard to narrow down my favorites, but this is my list and I'm sticking with it. So let me know down below what some of your favorite books were. I would love to know what you loved this year. That's what I love about these videos, is everyone's just like gushing about the great books they read. So yes, please let me know down below what your favorites were, because I want to hear all about it. Oh, now Morgan's coming in here. Hi, is it just a girl party in here today, huh? Okay, I know, I'm in your chair. Anyways, I hope you guys have a happy new year and that 2023 treats you well. I hope everybody has a great year. And yeah, I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.